Hi, here we are again to finish up our slideshow. We did a little work last time, and we set the this dataset property to set the transition time and the delay for each slide. So now we can create a slideshow. We can set the delay time and the transition. So a developer could use our code in their project and configure the code here in the HTML as they write a web page without having to dig through the JavaScript code to fix things, right? And it's flexible because each slideshow we created could have a different, delay and transition time, so we can configure that for each time this is used. So, the code here is kind of good. It's kind of generic. We have one function. We're not writing a separate function for each slideshow, right? Can we take that even further, right? So, I like what we have here, but there's a couple things that we could improve on, right? So one, the code here is in the script tag. So it'd be nice for us to have this in a separate file so anybody could download that file and link to it, right? And then second, our code here requires that the developer call the make slideshow method, right? So we could even improve on this and create our slideshows automatically by looking for, let's say, a class name up here, right? So let's get started with that, right? And that'll take our code even further and start turning it into like a more generic and portable library, right? Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find the JavaScript down here. And for us, this is all of the all of the slideshow code. So I'm going to select everything here, and I'm going to cut it. So I just removed it, and what I'll do is I'll make a new file, and I'll paste all of that code into my new file, and then I'm going to carefully format it so it looks nice. And I'll save it into the slideshow folder. Now, I need to give this a name. I'm going to call it the MS slideshow, right? .js. So there we go. And I'll put it in, you'll see it here. It'll be in the folder here with the index.html and the images, right? So there we go. And if I go into my code here, I'm going to change this script tag here so it looks like this. So this is where it was before. So what I'll do is I'll go to the script tag and I'll set the source here, right? So I'll set it to MS slideshow.js. And so when I've done that, essentially everything will be the same. So if I refresh, yeah, everything seems to be working right. Okay. So that's not too bad. Actually, it's just the opposite. It's really good, right? So everybody's working. Here's a thing about JavaScript, though. Okay, so let's say a developer imports our library, or even, imagine you're working at a company and you're writing code for the company, and you've written this great slideshow and they want to use it, the other web developers at your company want to use it. They're just going to import it like this, and they're not going to look in here at the code. Why should they have to, right? You've written it and they're hoping it's just going to work. But what they might do is they might make their own script tag because they have, very specific code that they need to run. And if they make a function called, make slideshow, right? I forget what I called mine, right? But if they write a function with the same name as the function that we have here, right? They'll be overriding our function, right? Actually, I don't know if this one, mine's probably still going to work here, but if I had done this before the code here, like I may have a problem, right? Actually, wait, let me go back. What if I do it this way? I think actually this might do it, right? Oh, it's still working. But you can see, like, if I write code here and it has the same name, I'm trying to, when you try to break things and then you can't break them, but if you're not trying, they just break automatically. So keep that in mind, right? So if you weren't trying to break this, it for sure wouldn't be working, right? But my point here is that when you write code in a script tag and you import code from another file, that code actually goes into sort of a global space in JavaScript. There is no separation. The only difference is that we can't see the code here unless we open up the file and look at it, right? And that's like a big problem for JavaScript, okay, and JavaScript developers, right? And JavaScript developers go through lots of trouble to avoid that problem. It's kind of like standard best practice, right, to avoid this situation. So we're going to do that too, right? So I've got the code here in MS Slideshow.js, and what I want to do is I want to separate this code from any other code that someone could write, other code here, right? Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this. I'm going to go into the MS Slideshow, and at the very top of the file, I'm going to write a function. Let me actually write it up here, and then actually I'm going to move this code into this new thing that I write up here. Okay, so let's kind of zoom in on this so we can see the form of it, right? I'm going to hide that slideshow because it's distracting, right? And what I'll do is I've written the parentheses and I've followed with another parentheses. Okay, so this is kind of a weird format here. I've got a parens and then I got another parens, right? And then inside here, I'm going to write a function, right? So I've got function, parentheses, curly brackets, and then I follow with the parentheses. So this is called an IIFE, IIFE. So it's like Immediately Invoked Function Expression. Okay, so this is a function, and I want to execute that function automatically. So I follow it with the parentheses. Now, normally, if you don't have the outer parentheses here, you can't follow this one with a parentheses, right? But normally, if you have a function, if you call on it, you say the name of the function, and then you put the parentheses on the end, and that executes the code in the function. JavaScript won't do that if we write it in this form, but if we wrap the first function in the parentheses, then that creates an expression out of this anonymous function here, and the parentheses here will execute it. So essentially, this form right here is an immediately invoked function. So we define a function, and then we run the code in that function immediately. Okay? So immediately invoked function expression. Know this because it's a question that could come up on a job interview or a coding interview. It's the kind of thing that people will kind of expect JavaScript developers to just know, right? So know this one. Be familiar with it, okay? Okay, so why would we use the IIFE, right, or this immediately invoked function expression? Well, when you define variables, for example, like const slides and slides inner and images and delay, and make slideshow also is actually kind of a variable, right? It's a name that goes into the global namespace. When you define these variables inside of a function, those names are not available outside. This is a term called scope. So scope says, like, when you declare a variable, right, it gets scoped to some area of the program. If it's in the global space, then it's globally scoped, and you can see it anywhere in every script tag, everywhere within your program. If it's defined within a function and you declared it with the word const or let, then it's block scoped, and it's scoped to the nearest set of curly braces, essentially, right? So in my case, slides inner, images, delay, transition, slide width, and index are all block scoped to this make slideshow function. So these variables don't escape this function, okay? So that's good for us. So that's why you may realize, like, this is like we could create 2 slideshows, right? And each of those slideshows will have different values for these variables, right? Because every time we call the function, it creates a new scope when you call the function, and then it creates new variables within that scope, and they're separate. So we're not overwriting the old variables, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to grab all the code here, and we're going to move it. Well, actually, wait, before I do, let me say one other thing, right? This variable here, or this function name, make slideshow, is the one thing that's globally scoped within the program that we've written so far. And if we leave it here, it's possible that someone could write a function named make slideshow, and then that would cause us some trouble, right? So what we're going to do is I'm going to grab all this, right? And I'm going to put it inside here, right? So now all of this goes inside my immediately invoked function expression, and now it's scoped to this anonymous function, right? So this variable doesn't escape here, and nobody has access to it, right? So that's pretty good. There's a problem though, because now any developer would have to write this code, make slideshow, and include the ID name within this function, right? So that's kind of a problem, because now we can't get these names out of here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this out. Okay, I'll just comment it for right now. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to call make slideshow on each element that is a slideshow element, right? So I'll just search the DOM, find all my slideshow elements, and call make slideshow with that element. So I'm going to change this up a little bit, right? And what I'm going to do is slides right here will be a DOM element that we pass into the slideshow. So I'm going to say where it says make slideshow, I'm going to put slides up here, and then I'm going to get rid of this line right here that says get element by ID slides ID. Okay? So we're going to remove that, and we're going to pass slides in. So I'm going to use the same variable name here, so that'll be the same name here and over here, right? But we'll pass it in. So we'll have to get that element first and then call make slideshow with that element, okay? So how are we going to do that, right? Well, what if we imagine that each of our slideshow divs, anytime someone wants to make a slideshow div, they'll give it a special class name. We'll search the DOM for those class names and then call this function on the element with that class name, okay? So at the bottom here, outside of the make slideshow function, which begins there and ends right here, right? So it ends there, but inside the immediately invoked function expression, so right in here, what we're going to do is we're going to say const slideshows equal document dot query selector all. Okay, so now you remember query selector all gets all elements that match a description, right? So, and we can use any CSS style selector here. Okay, so what I'll do is, and what we need here is we need to make a CSS class name that is unique enough where someone's not going to accidentally use the same name for something else. So a lot of times what people will do is they'll make a like prefix for their class name. So I'm going to call mine MS. So I'm going to say MS slideshow, like this, right? So any div that has MS slideshow on it with a class, I put the dot there for a class, right? So any div that, or any element actually doesn't even have to be a div. If it has MS slideshow on it, it'll be one of the slideshows, right? And query selector all will get all of these out of the DOM. So this returns an array-like object or a collection of all elements that match this description. And what we'll do is we'll say, hey, for, and we can use our for loop again. I'll say let I equal 0. Let's loop while I is less than slideshows dot length, and then we'll say I plus equals 1. And then for each one of these slideshows, we'll call make slideshow. That's our function up here. And we can call this one inside this function expression because we're inside there, but that function won't be in the global space, so we can't call it from outside of here, right? So what we'll do is we'll call this, and what we want to do is we want to call it with each of the slideshows. So I'll put slideshow here, and since it's an array-like object, we can use the square brackets to access each of the slides, and then this should select each of those slides, right? Let's give this a try and see if it's still working here, if I made a mistake, right? I think it's not working. Let's check. Let's get the inspector here and see what's happening. Do I have an error? No, I don't have an error. So let's check. Okay, so if we're not calling the slide, oh, you know what? I forgot. I just realized I made this new class name, but I didn't use it. So actually, this would be a thing that a developer would do, is they would try it and the slideshow wouldn't work. You probably have done this with Bootstrap, right? We'll copy the class name here, and we need to assign it to our slides. So when I go up here and I find this one block here where I gave it ID slides and I gave it class name slideshow, I'm going to give it this class name MS slideshow, right? And I should probably just change slideshow here to MS slideshow in our CSS also. But let's do that as a second step, okay? So I'll change this one also to MS slideshow, and we'll see what happens here. So I'll refresh it and cross my fingers. Oh, looks like it's working, right? Okay, hey, great, good for us. Okay, so that's pretty good. Let's do one more step, right? Because we'd like to wrap this up so anybody could use it, right? And really what we have is we have two parts. They'll need to have this JavaScript, and then they also need to have the styles that we wrote up here in the head of the document. And if you recall, I kind of grouped these into two styles or two groups. So the first group is here, and it's the slideshow styles, and the second group is the developer styles, okay? So this is like, these are styles that anybody might use to modify the slideshow to fit their design, you know, or fit their website that they're using. Like they want to set the width and height of their slides, you know, and maybe the border color and stuff, right? Up here, though, these are the styles that our slideshow requires, right? So we're going to include those with our own msslideshow.css. And so people will import that. And you may, like, if you're following along with this, this is very similar to, you know, how you would work with Bootstrap. And this is what the Bootstrap developers do, right? They've written their code in a similar way that we've written ours, right? So I'm going to cut these out of here. And what I'm selecting here is all the styles that are in the slideshow styles section, and I'm going to leave the developer styles here, okay? So I'll cut all of these out of that, out of my style tag. I'll make a brand new file and paste them. I'll format them real quick, and then I'll save them here, and I'm going to call them msslideshow.css, okay? So I'll save those guys. And then now when I go back to index.html, what I'll do is in the head of the document here, I will link to my style sheet. So I'll create a link. I'll say rel style sheet, and then href equals see if I can get it to code hint me again. Oh yeah, there we go, right? So I'll choose the slideshow.css here, and then I'll close off my link to my developer style. So any developer that wants to use our library, we could post it online, we could put it on NPM, you know, put it on our website, put it on GitHub. What they'll do is they'll download the two files, MS Slideshow CSS and MS Slideshow JS, and they'll link to the CSS file, and they'll link to the JavaScript file. And then if they have other CSS or JavaScript, they can add that after the link to our file, right? So let's give that a quick test here and make sure it's still working. Oh yeah, it looks like it's still working, right? So anyway, thanks for watching. I hope that that's interesting. We've taken our slideshow now to another level where it's like portable, like anybody could use it. It's flexible, right? You know, that's like the next step in creating professional libraries. So thanks for watching, and if you have any questions, please post them to the comments.